This is London calling. Here is a news flash. The German radio has just announced Hitler is dead. I'll repeat that. The German radio has just announced that Hitler is dead.
As VE Day approached, anticipation spread across Britain. On the evening of the 7th of May 1945, the Ministry of Information issued a long-awaited announcement to the public. It is understood that in accordance with arrangements between the three great powers, an official announcement will be broadcast by the Prime Minister at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, May 8th. In view of this fact, tomorrow, Tuesday, will be treated as Victory in Europe Day and will be regarded as a holiday. The day following, Wednesday, May the 9th, will also be a holiday. His Majesty the King will broadcast to the peoples of the British Empire and Commonwealth tomorrow, Tuesday at 9 p.m. DBST. Parliament will meet at the usual time tomorrow. Much of the popular memory of Victory in Europe Day centres on the vast crowds in London, but the celebrations were by no means confined to the capital. Across the West Country, in every city, town and small village, the mood was just as electric, and streets filled with street parties, parades and church services. Despite the declaration of a national holiday, everyday routines did not disappear entirely. In some places, children were still expected to attend school on the morning of May 8th. At St Nicholas School in Broadway, Weymouth, children gathered as usual for an assembly and a short service before finally being dismissed, released into what would become 2 days of nationwide celebration. In Weymouth itself, the atmosphere was nothing short of jubilant. The Southern Times reported that on both nights of the VE holiday, the Pier Bandstand was crowded with a merrymaking throng, singing, dancing, laughing, shouting, and not a little lovemaking. And for the first time in 6 long years, church bells rang out in full peal. That sound alone meant something. During the war, bells had been reserved for invasion warnings. Now they meant peace, and that war, at least here, was over. Further along the coast in Swanage, there were street parties and bonfires. Local headlines proclaimed Swanage streets crowded, beflagged and carpeted with confetti. And it wasn't just the larger towns, even the smallest villages played their part. In Piddle-Trent-Hyde, the BBC reported live coverage from the heart of the festivities, painting a lively picture of the landlord in the new inn and his wife serving pints as fast as they could draw them. The first Dorset celebrated VE Day with an athletics meeting, while for the second Dorsets, the end of the war seemed like a long way off in the Far East. The 4th and the 5th Dorsets were temporarily removed from the 43rd Wessex Division, whom they'd battled through Europe with, and were attached to the 51st Highland Division, accepting the surrender of a German army corps on the River Ems. For many, however, VE Day was not solely a time of celebration. Beneath the music and laughter lay a deep sense of loss and a stark reminder of those who would never return. A.H. Trelawney Ross, a housemaster at Sherborne School, put it eloquently. "I have known so well these splendid boys who have fallen, have no heart for merrymaking, though thankful beyond words that so many have been spared." His words reflect a truth felt across the nation. Even throughout moments of national triumph, the grief remained ever present. This balance was captured in the pages of the Dorset County Chronicle on May 10th. Its headline read, "VE Day celebrations and Thanksgiving, holiday atmosphere, but our men in the Far East not forgotten." When the Allies declared the 8th of May 1945 as Victory in Europe Day, many understood that fighting continued thousands of miles away. The war in the Far East seemed unlikely to end for a long time, and for countless families, loved ones were still in danger. It would take another 3 months, and the devastating use of atomic weapons in early August 1945 on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to force Japan's surrender, bringing a cataclysmic end to a war that had cost the lives of an estimated 60 million people. On August 15th, 1945, Victory over Japan Day was declared, marking the end of the war in Asia. The formal surrender was signed weeks later, on September 2nd, finally bringing the Second World War to its official close. For many fanatical Japanese soldiers and civilians, the surrender was viewed as a fate worse than death, opting to commit suicide rather than accept defeat. Hundreds of British, Commonwealth and US prisoners of war were murdered by the Japanese army on learning of the surrender, and thousands more murders were ordered, which were thankfully avoided due to the camps being liberated just days before these atrocities were due to take place. Celebrations broke out around Great Britain at the news of VJ Day, but not to the same extent as had been seen on VE Day 3 months earlier. In Weymouth, residents still took to the streets in large numbers, their celebrations loud and spirited, joined by the large number of ships in the harbour. This carried on into the early hours of the morning and was described by one local reporter as having a touch of delirium. Further afield in Bournemouth, reports estimated that some 15,000 gathered in Westover Road to listen to a broadcast by George VI. What followed were 2 more days of fervent celebration as communities came together once again, this time marking not just victory in Europe, but the end of war across the globe. And yet, even in these moments of relief and unity, there remained a lingering sense that not all sacrifices had been equally recognised. The troops who fought in the Far East during the Second World War came to be known as the Forgotten Army. These troops faced the harshest conditions of the war, through hostile terrain, unforgiving weather, and a brutal enemy who were known for their inhumane treatment of prisoners and civilians alike. And for much of the war, their experience had been overshadowed by events in Europe. For these men, VJ Day brought a measure of recognition, but for many it felt delayed. There was, however, one notable recognition. In 1946, Field Marshal Bill Slim personally selected a British brigade to join the American occupation of Japan. 1 Scottish battalion, 1 Welsh battalion, and 1 English battalion. That English battalion was the 2nd Battalion Dorsetshire Regiment, chosen in recognition of their actions at Kohima, one of the turning points of the war in the East. Today we remember these events as 2 separate days, VE Day and VJ Day, but in reality they are part of the same story. And in places like Dorset, far from the centres of power, but deeply connected to the people who served, those moments were felt just as strongly. Not just in celebration, but in absence, and in the quiet understanding of what it had all cost. Thank you to the National Lottery Heritage Fund and National Lottery players who have made this video and videos like this possible.